Hi, and welcome to Answers News for March 22nd, 2018. And Ken is back, and we have Avery with us. And if you hear yesterday, even though the 20th was spring, we had about 5 inches of snow here yesterday.
And they're expecting another,
more on
1, 3, 5 inch or something on Saturday.
Saturday, yeah. So it's been a little weird, to have this much snow this late in the season.
But it melts pretty quickly.
Well, I hope so.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, except
there's like all these daffodils
my daughter
blooming in the
built a
garden
gigantic snowman in our front yard today, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, who would have thought that in March? So.
Well, I did a Facebook Live this morning. Mm-hmm. We're producing a movie for our special effects theatre. We're refurbishing our special effects theatre. For those of you here at the Creation Museum, you didn't tell our studio audience to clap.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a wonderful studio audience, so
yeah,
clap. I don't remember unless I write it down.
So I was actually down in Florida and flew back last night, and I didn't know that spring was not here, even though it is. And so I got up this morning, had to go over early to our, we have a facility that we rent at Hebron where we have our warehouses and all sorts of print shop and design studios, fabrication shop where they build the exhibits and so on. And we set up some sets there, and we're doing a movie. It's going to be really spectacular to be shown in our new 4D theatre when it opens probably the end of May. We're refurbishing it right now. And I get out to my car, and in the end, I gave up trying to get into my car. It was covered in ice, and it sealed up everything, and I got out the de-icer, and that didn't work. And so I had to grab my wife's car and race over and do that. So, anyway. Answers Live every Monday and Thursday here at 2 o'clock.
Answers News Live.
Answers News Live. Okay, thank you for that correction. Yes. So, hey, if you're coming to the Ark soon, or if you're going, studio audience, some of you, how many of you have already been there? A number of you. How many are going tomorrow? When you go down there on the third deck, we just put in a brand new exhibit. Our big time charts. Have you seen our time charts of history? For instance, this is the big one. And the good thing about it is I can block out Georgia Purdom. There we are. We're going to keep this up for the whole of the rest of the program. But anyway, that... okay, Avery, it's your job to fix that up.
I get to fix it. Yay me.
There we go.
So we have that one, and we have another one, and this one's for kids.
Smaller.
And it's really the whole history of the world. There we are, again.
Yeah. This one's 15 feet long, I think.
This one's 15 feet long. The other one's 25 feet long.
25?
But they blew them up slightly and put them up as exhibits at the Ark. There's Brandy, the picture there. She's the artist that actually did all this and got it all ready. And as you look at it, it's quite spectacular. And people can get those time charts in our gift store. Mm-hmm. So that's a new exhibit that we've got there on the third deck. You can't miss it there of the Ark. And then I wanted to mention to you our Sunday school curriculum, Answers Bible curriculum, that 10,000 churches now use.
Oh, awesome.
And it goes from Genesis to Revelation. It's a 4-year curriculum, and it's done for all ages and synchronized, right from pre-K all the way through.
Adult. Mm-hmm.
And we have actually a free Easter lesson that we want people to go to our bookstore and download and use it for Easter. It's quite a phenomenal program. So encourage people to do that. Okay, let me just run through it. Someone from Kenya and
somebody said it's 40 degrees
Georgia,
in North Dakota.
North Carolina, East Africa, Detroit. Is Detroit still a city?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
And
Someone said Toronto earlier. Ooh,
from the
Canadians.
studio audience, Calgary,
Kansas.
and North Dakota,
California.
Washington,
Idaho,
North Dakota,
Texas.
Kansas, Joplin, Missouri,
It could be like a geography thing.
California. Oh, no, this says California, Kentucky. Is there a
Yes,
California,
there is.
Kentucky? Is that right? Okay. Oh, we're getting lots of emojis. That is really great. Boise, Idaho, Fort Worth, Texas. Okay, and they keep coming in, so it's time to hand over to who's starting off with these
All
articles.
right.
Take it away.
This first item comes from The Conversation, which I believe is an Australian publication. The greatest moral challenge of our time, it's how we think about morality itself. So in this article, this person is basically arguing against objective morality and there being any kind of objective truth, while he makes objective truth statements, absolute statements about morality. It's the quick way to sum it up.
You're basically struggling with trying to figure out how do you decide what morality you should abide by.
Right. Because if you don't start with the Bible, then you don't start with some kind of ultimate standard, then how do you decide?
In fact, he even says in this article, let me see, on the last page, I believe it is, he actually makes the comment that, now this doesn't mean morality becomes an anything goes form of relativism. Well, yes, it does.
Yeah.
If you don't have an absolute authority, ultimately anything goes. And all through this article, he's sort of struggling with how do you decide what's right and what's wrong? And people say murder is wrong and that's fact, but why is that fact? Who decides that that's fact?
It's like they know it. Like, I think because, the Bible says that people suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Like, they know it, but they don't want to admit it, And he even says here, he says, so morality is a set of rules we live by that seek to reduce harm and help us live together effectively. But why? I mean, that's what you think it should be, but what if somebody else thinks it should be to cause harm and not live together effectively? Why is that wrong? And so without any kind of absolute ultimate authority to decide, it's just all, it's all
and
relative.
who defines harm and who defines living together effectively?
Well, remember when I took Bill Nye through the Ark and we videoed that for 2 hours? We call it the second debate, and you can watch it on YouTube or you can get it as a DVD. One of the questions I asked him was, how do you decide right and wrong? And he said, a consensus of the tribe. And then I said, well, what if a tribe decides that people like you are dangerous and they want to eliminate you? Is that right or wrong? And he said, well, it depends. But at least he's being consistent, and that sort of. And it's interesting here in this article. He says, even if you believe there is a divine moral source that can dictate absolute right from wrong, it's still down to us mere mortals to figure out the correct interpretation of its will. And he goes on to say, and history has shown that disagreements over different interpretations and so on still do today when dogmatists attempt to force their version of morality on the unwilling. So, but he's trying to force his view of morality
version, right, which
on
says,
us.
It's always self-refuting. That's the problem.
Well, he talks about the fact that we need to be more tolerant. He says, all this means that morality should be less about proving your view and more about tolerance and negotiation. Well, is he prepared to be tolerant of God's foundation for morality, which abortion is wrong, marriage is one man and one woman? Well, he's not going to be tolerant of that.
No.
He says we need to be less morally dogmatic and more morally adaptable.
But that's a dogmatic statement.
Yes.
I mean, that's an absolute statement.
And so he just says, he's really struggling with the fact that how do you decide what's right and what's wrong? Romans 2 tells us that we have a conscience. God tells us that. That's why this author has a sense of right and wrong and knows that murder is wrong. He said, the problem is, having a view of morality that steers us towards thinking in black and white terms. Well, then his black and white terms is we shouldn't think in black and white terms. It's always self-refuting.
It is.
As you go through it.
It's so confusing. That's what it ends up being.
And just to remind people, we do put links to all these articles right at the beginning of the comments, so you can go and read this for yourself. I just think this is a really good article to read, to see how somebody is telling us you can't have an absolute morality and they're very absolute about it. And also how this person is really struggling because this is where the culture's at. I mean, it really is. Once you abandon the basis and absolute authority in God's word, ultimately anything does go. Who decides right and wrong? And when you say, well, this is what's best for the tribe, what if another tribe says, no, we think this is best? And so it goes on. So anyway, it's a good illustration of really where our culture's at, I thought.
This next one comes from Christian News. Shout Your Abortion founder on Bible Belt abortion storytelling tour. So basically there's this woman, an abortion advocate, who started the hashtag Shout Your Abortion, which was basically encouraging women to share and celebrate their abortion stories. And it's turned into kind of a movement, and she's doing an abortion storytelling tour with another woman throughout the Bible Belt to encourage women to share their abortion stories and celebrate them.
As I read this, I mean, to me, and they're doing it in the Bible Belt areas deliberately to promote abortion, really what they're doing, and you see a picture of these women, they're all sitting around smiling, talking about, isn't it wonderful? We sacrificed our children to the God of self. Isn't it wonderful? Let's talk about how we murdered
But
our
they're
children.
trying to normalize it. That's just
Yep.
what it comes down to. Is they said they want to make it like almost any other life experience. So murdering your child should be just like any other life experience, like getting married, having kids,
Buying a
all
house.
it should be the same. It's on the same level is what they want to try
And
to
as
make
they
it.
do this tour, they're handing out pins that say abortion is normal. We should be there handing out pins. Abortion is murder.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
that's what we need to be doing there. And it's just sad. And the other thing is they talk about, in this article, they talk about Planned Parenthood.
Yep.
Did you know that in the 2016 to 2017 fiscal year, Planned Parenthood alone performed 321,384 abortions? That means they murdered that many children. And in fact, the number totally murdered since Roe versus Wade is 60 million. And the
And that's
number,
just US.
didn't you give a number the other
It was
day in the
one-
world?
Probably 1 billion worldwide have been murdered.
last 100 years,
total. Because in other countries, obviously, it's even more.
And
Hard
this
to
is in our
believe,
modern
but it's even more
times.
prolific. Yeah, in our modern times. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
1 billion,
1 billion children
children.
have just disappeared off the planet, basically. So.
Okay, imagine how many scientists and musicians and artists and
Well, regardless, what they would grow up to be, these are human beings made in the
Yeah.
image of God, and they have a right to life because of that. And so it's just sad. And they talk about, in the latter part of the article, they talk about, like Ken was saying, Planned Parenthood, but then they talk about Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. And some of the stuff she says, it's all freely available online, so you can read it for yourself, but she was basically, she saw abortion as weeding out the unfit and preventing the birth of defectives or of those who will become defectives. It had a very what we call eugenics. She wanted well-born individuals, and so
Her definition of well-born.
right. And so we have a conference coming up, a women's conference, April 6th and 7th, and I'm actually going to address this very topic. This is something I've done a lot of research on, and the connections of abortion and Planned Parenthood to eugenics, and so
Because it's not a dead idea. Like, it didn't die with Margaret Sanger. It's
Oh, yeah.
definitely still
It's
very
still
much alive in our
happening.
But
culture.
listen to this quote Margaret Sanger said. Every feeble-minded girl or woman of the hereditary type, especially of the moron class, should be segregated during the reproductive period. Otherwise, she is almost certain to bear imbecile children who in turn are just as certain to breed other defectives. She's the one that founded Planned Parenthood.
And she goes on, actually, after that, they don't give it there, to say that they actually should be sterilized, not just segregated, sterilized. And that happened in the U.S.
She decried what she characterized as women serving as incubators in a male-dominated civilization. People need to understand why Planned Parenthood was founded and what the whole foundation of that evil place
Yeah.
is all about.
So
And,
if you want to find out more information about the women's conference, it's called Answers for Women. You can go to answersforwomen.org to find out about that. And we're going to be addressing this issue as well as many other life-related issues. So hope that you'll check that out.
Yeah, the funny thing is, somebody here made a comment, Planned Parenthood murders baby girls. See, think about it. Here they are talking about, those comments by Margaret Sanger about, a
She was a
male-dominated
feminist,
society
yeah.
and that, but then she wants to kill all these baby girls.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It's just evil. But who would have thought you'd ever have these people going around doing tours and wanting to do it in the Bible Belt to proclaim how wonderful it is to have an abortion, to kill your children? It's just
horrible.
where our culture is at.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
This next one comes from Science News. We probably won't hear from aliens, but by the time we do, they'll be dead.
This was a serious article. It was
That's
just-
the
It's
sad
very
part.
serious. Our audience clearly got that it was serious by all the laughing they did.
it's a serious article. They're saying, the reason we're not going to find these aliens, they're already dead.
Yeah, so basically what they're saying is if you have in the Milky Way, if you have a civilization sending out signals, to reach other people or other, alien beings or whatever, it's gonna take them the radio waves, time to travel across the galaxy.
Right.
So by the time they reach Earth, if we even do pick them up, the civilization that sent those will already have probably been dead. So we'll just have these ghost waves floating throughout the galaxy.
If that's the ultimate end of them, they're dead. By the time the signals get here, our civilization will be dead, according to the same philosophy,
that's
right?
what's so crazy about it.
So-
and what's funny at the very end, it says the scientist Grimaldi is now working on a paper about what it means that we found none so far. So you're writing a paper about nothing, essentially.
Yeah.
I can tell you why
that
we
get
haven't
published?
found any yet.
And they get millions of dollars in grants for that.
Oh.
Guess what? I wrote a paper to
Crazy.
say why we found no aliens. Oh, let's give you millions of dollars so you can search for more aliens.
Sad, sad.
I tell you what is interesting, though. When I say I don't believe in aliens, and I put that on social media, on Twitter or Facebook,
Have fun with that.
people go nuts. Even Christians go nuts.
Yep.
They say, how dare you say there's no aliens out there? The universe is so big, it's obvious there's aliens on other planets and so on. You know, one of the things I keep saying to people is, they say, well, the Bible doesn't say, you know, there's no aliens out there. Well, the Bible doesn't say whether there is or is not life in outer space. But the Bible does tell us God made the earth first. It tells us he made the sun, moon, and stars for signs and seasons for the earth. And it does tell us that Adam's sin affected the entire universe. And in fact, in Psalm 8, verse 6, it says that man has dominion over the works of his hand. And in verse 3 before that, it says the stars are the works of his hand. So when God said Adam had dominion, it's over the creation, right? Adam was given that role. And when Adam's sin affected the whole universe, because Romans 8 says the whole creation groans, think about this. If there are races of beings on other planets, they're affected by Adam's sin, right? And the effect of sin is death, right? That's the consequence. But it's only Adam's descendants who can be saved, because God stepped into history to be, God's son stepped into history to be a descendant of Adam, to be the God-man, not the God-Klingon or something like that, right? But to be the God-man. And so it doesn't make sense. There are races of other beings on other planets. It just doesn't fit with what the gospel is all
Christians
about.
need to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you wrote a blog about that a couple of years ago, and it was very clear, and you were just, laying out your reasons for why you don't think aliens exist. And the headlines literally were, Ken Ham doesn't think we should look for aliens because they're going to hell anyway.
Yeah, because I said it doesn't make sense from perspective of the gospel. Yeah, if you actually type in, do a search on the internet, Ken Ham says aliens are going to hell. Even some of the
There's
newspapers
tons and
put
tons of
that
articles out
headline. I didn't say they're going to hell. I said they didn't exist.
Yeah.
How can they go to hell if they don't exist?
So don't always trust what you read in the news. is
Well,
the
that's
moral
for
of the
sure. Yeah,
story.
you can't trust that.
But yeah, so another reason we won't find aliens, they're dead already. So
Yeah,
there
you
go.
know, it's interesting. It's like missing links. Do you know why they're missing? Because there's none. That's why they're missing. They call them missing. We say they're not there. Why can't you find aliens? Because they're dead. I think it's because they're not there. And they never were. So,
Okay.
anyway, dead aliens. Wow, that's a great news item.
All right. This one also comes from science, or then this one comes from New Scientist. Weird crystals could grow on Titan and help alien life thrive. So another alien one. So this is about Saturn's largest moon, Titan, and they've basically tried to, I guess, simulate the environment to figure out what could happen on Titan. And they figured out that there's these like co-crystals that could potentially form, and they think maybe this weird environment would give rise to weird life forms.
Yeah, they think this weird... You know, a lot of times when you read these things...
You're just like, what?
You're just reading... It's like reading a fiction book. I mean, now, look, listen to this. This is a serious scientist writing this. Listen to this. Titan, right, they're talking about one of Saturn's moons, right? Titan is like a parallel Earth. Now, read this. Tell me if you think this is a parallel Earth, okay? Thick clouds hide a surface covered in large bodies of liquid and muddy terrain, and it has regular precipitation, but instead of water, a Titan surface is carved out by liquid ethane, methane, and other hydrocarbons streaming and pooling just as water does on our planet.
That sounds
That doesn't
exactly
sound
like
like
Earth.
This person, you know what, if they think Titan is a parallel Earth,
They should move
do you know
there.
They should move there, exactly. I suggest they go to Titan.
Go have fun
Live
on
there.
Titan.
Go have fun on the parallel Earth. Yeah, see if you can breathe ethane, methane. It says
Methane.
the existent methane.
Yeah,
No,
methane.
you pronounced that wrong.
You Australians.
So the existence of co-crystals on Titan has been suggested before, such as benzene ethane compound that forms readily in conditions like those of hydrocarbon seas. Ammonia is known to exist in Titan's atmosphere. It's probably also found in liquid water ocean deep under the moon's icy surface.
See, they think if you get all these organic, things that have carbon in them, because carbon is, obviously in every life form on Earth. And so they say, well, if you can have a way to get carbon, you can have a way to get organic molecules, you can have life. But the key ingredient isn't all these organic, carbon and all that stuff. It's information. You need information for life. You need DNA. You need some sort of information source. And for that, you need a designer. It doesn't come about by random chance. So there's still, even if you could get all these carbon compounds and even some organic molecules, that doesn't equal life. And that's the thing. They don't want to.
It's funny, I've read articles where scientists say it almost looks like Earth was designed specially for life. Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine
You'd
that.
almost think so.
Yeah. It's amazing. Hey,
And one thing they didn't mention in this article is actually the methane and ethane on Titan is actually a huge challenge to the millions of years paradigm because it doesn't fit with what they expect. We have a really great article on our website about that. If you just go in and type Titan into the search engine, you'll find it. It's really fascinating.
by the way, Avery is Canadian. You can tell that because she's always talking about boots. A boot. Right? A boot. Isn't that what you say? A boot?
About.
We call a boot in Australia is what you call a trunk over here. You know that? Your
I
trunk
did know
is
that.
The boot?
Yes.
Yeah. And
But it's about.
okay, so, but somebody in regard to that abortion article said the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, is taking away grants from organisations that will not go along with killing preborn baby girls and boys. Christian camps will not receive any
We
government
talked about
funding.
that on Monday.
And we've had that
Yeah.
in
Yeah, and
previous
they-
news items.
Just a couple of days ago, I believe it went to court or something, and people were trying to challenge it, and they ended up upholding it, and it's going to stick. So that was pretty disappointing.
Okay, we have to get to these next two articles because I love this is about DNA. So Scott Kelly's year in space changed his.
Okay, this is where you actually see a scientist get excited
I was totally geeking
because
out.
she's a
on these.
geneticist,
Yeah.
geeking out.
Geeking out
Yeah,
on these,
see?
right? Because it changed his gene expression.
See, we have a geek here.
Can I talk?
This is a real, hey kids, this is a real live geek. I want you to
right.
see, you've met a
Science
geek.
geek.
This is a creationist geek.
Okay. So what happened was there's these twin
A CG,
brothers.
creationist geek.
Yes,
We'll have to
okay.
call you that.
Shush, let me talk. Okay, so there's these twin brothers, and they both happen to be astronauts, right? Which is like never happened before. Scott Kelly and Mark Kelly. So Scott Kelly went up into space, and he's actually spent the most time at the International Space Station, which was 340 days, so just
Almost
shy
a
of a
year,
year
yeah.
in space. And what they did was before and after, and I think even during, they checked his genes and how much they're expressed versus his brothers, because the idea is that because they're identical twins, they have identical DNA sequence. But how that sequence is read and expressed can be different depending on the environments that each of the twins is in. And what they found was that the twin that was in space, Scott, that he actually, well, first of all, he grew 2 inches. He was 2 inches taller. He didn't say grew, but he was 2 inches taller when he came to Earth because of the effects of gravity. Obviously,
He's since shrunk back down to his
right.
height,
He did
which is
shrink
also
back
interesting.
down. But so some of it, quite a few of his, the expression of some of
You
his.
just got to get older to shrink down.
So the expression of quite a few of his genes had changed while he was in space. Most of them came back to normal. But even 2 years later, 7% of his genes are still expressed differently than that of his brother. So space has actually changed his genetic expression.
But they got it wrong in the
Really
article,
cool.
didn't they?
Well, when I first read this article, I was like, they're saying the sequence changed. No, it didn't. You can't change 7% of your DNA and still be alive.
And guess what? You were right because they
I
came
know.
out with a second article.
When I saw it, I'm like,
We were totally wrong about that Scott Kelly space gene story.
yeah, because there's no way. Any two humans are only about 0.1% different. So there's no way he's got 7% of his DNA changed.
But the interesting thing, they had to get their little evolution bit in.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
in the second article here, where they said we were totally wrong because it had to do with gene expression, as you say, not
Right.
changing
Not-
the genes.
Genes
And they
change
said
actual code.
here, the divergence in chimp versus human DNA comes from roughly 40 million mutations ago, and says all humans share more than 99% of our DNA and more than 98% of our DNA with chimpanzees. They just had to put that in.
Yeah.
And you've done the
Always.
research on that, haven't you?
Well, yeah, and we have a lot of articles on our website that talk about the differences between humans and chimps. And it's just the way
It's not
that they're
98%
No.
similarity.
No, it's the way
No.
they're counting the differences that lead them to those numbers. And so you can find out more information about that on our website. But yeah, it's wrong. So it is cool though. And it basically, it's stressing him to be in space. It's stressing his body in ways. And so his body's reacting, which is good. God designed the body to be able.
It's such a cool design feature. That
to adapt
gene
to those
expression
different
is so cool.
environments. So
And whenever,
Yeah.
usually when that happens with animals, if they're adapting and changing in some way, but it's a designed inbuilt feature,
Right.
they try to make out it's evidence for evolution.
Yeah.
But it's just inbuilt design that's already
And
there.
this is an area called epigenetics. So it's basically on top of the gene. So how the genes are being expressed, the chemical markers change. And we have information on that on our website too. I've written about
It just goes to show life is much more complex. And
Oh,
the whole,
yeah.
the information there in our genes is so much more complex than any of us even imagine. I think in years to come, they're going to look back at what we were saying about DNA today and say, those people knew nothing. You know,
I always say the more we know, the less we know.
Speaking of, this
Because-
next one shows that exactly.
Yeah. So this was another really cool one called dark DNA, the missing matter at the heart of nature. So basically,
is that like Darth Vader? Oh no, it's Darth Vader. It's not Dark Vader. No.
the dark matter, so astronomers talk about dark matter, that there's this matter that we haven't been able to detect yet. Well, this is kind of its biological equivalent called dark DNA. So basically, just to give you a real brief synopsis, because the article is kind of long, but there's a sand rat that they didn't find a gene in it that they would expect to find. It should be it's found in all vertebrates, but they couldn't find it in the sand rat. But even though they couldn't find the gene, the DNA, they could find the RNA, which comes from the DNA. It's a copy of it. And they could find the protein, which doesn't make any sense. Because if it doesn't have the DNA, how does it have the RNA? How does it have the protein? And so what they discovered was that certain parts of the genome are very hard to sequence, okay? Because they have a lot of G's and C's, okay? They're hard to sequence. Well, when they investigated this area, lo and behold, they find the gene there. And so it just goes to show that those areas are very information rich. They're not just a bunch of repetitive sequences, that they have information in them. And they even said when they looked at this in birds, they think maybe we're underestimating how many genes birds have by 15%.
Ton of genes.
So it's there, it's just finding it that's
That could be
challenging.
true of all creatures, though.
Yeah, we don't know how
Could
much.
it be true of humans too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and see, that's the thing that I found intriguing about this, because we have 100,000 to 300,000 proteins, but only 20,000 genes. So where's the rest of the information coming from? So that's why I was geeking out about this one too, because I'm like,
Boy, this,
It's really cool.
this is your geek
I
day.
know. Well, I chose the articles.
Yeah. Boy, you know what I don't
interesting to see
understand?
what comes
What?
of this.
They call it the fat sand rat, right? The fat
Well-
sand rat, and yet it's only when it gets in a laboratory and they give it different food it gets fat. Otherwise, shouldn't it be called a
Otherwise-
skinny sand rat?
Otherwise, it's fine. And the thing is, like with this whole dark DNA, like the gene that they found there, that they thought was missing, but they found, it's way different than that same gene in lots of other vertebrates. So they're like, well, why is that? Well, I think there's a couple of, it's designed that way. God designed it that way. It's not really mutant. It could be that, God designed our genes to possibly take a lot of hits and keep on ticking, is what I say. So the genes are very robust. Or it could be an adaptation of feature, because they live in a very specific environment where they only have all these leaves to eat. And so when they get in the lab and they're fed normal food, they get really fat. So it could just be
They
an
get
adaptation
diabetes.
thing. We don't know. We got to study it more.
Yeah.
'Cause-
Yeah, it's a
You know-
brand new area of research.
You know, when I wrote this down, one of the things that I put here, a comment that I made was, imagine if the scientists who were doing all this research had a Christian creationist framework
Yep.
in terms of an infinite creator God who designed everything and designed us to survive in a fallen world,
Right.
and then you got the effects of the fall and the curse. Do you realize if they started looking at everything from the right framework, they could have a whole different understanding and maybe see things in a different way and learn
for
things
sure.
that would really be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and it's interesting to read the last sentence of the article. The last sentence says, it shows we still have a lot to learn about how genomes evolve at the molecular level and how these processes give rise to the awe-inspiring diversity of life on Earth. we still don't know how it all happened by chance random processes.
Yeah, and there's a
Because it
lot
did.
more in that article we could say, but if they do find all these genes that they didn't know were there, they're going to have to totally rewrite their evolutionary trees because they're based off of that. So
Yeah.
it's very intriguing.
And they even say in here, well, now dark DNA might be the driving force of evolution. So
Right.
now they're like, it's gonna,
Because,
yeah.
their other systems aren't working, so they're
Yeah.
trying to find something else.
Someone here said, geeks of the world unite.
Yeah.
Oh, someone here said, see, they don't understand my context, but despite the earlier insult, Ken, lots of love, support, and prayers are being sent to your ministry from sunny Detroit. Well, the point is, Delta moved its hub from Cincinnati to Detroit, and I'm
Right.
always flying through Detroit.
Oh.
And I'm always mad that they moved their hub from Cincinnati. Now I've got to fly to Detroit all the time.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
And you
see, that's
do
why
lots of
my
flying.
negative comment about Detroit. All right, it's all because of Delta
Here,
Airlines.
This next one comes from Christian Post. State Supreme Court says tax dollars can't repair churches' historic stained glass windows. So this is a church in Massachusetts that basically applied for a grant so that they have these stained glass windows in the church that are like over 100 years old, and they're hoping to kind of restore it and do some different things to the church. And so, but the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, big surprise there, doesn't like that the church is getting this grant, and so they've taken them to court, and they've so far won at the Supreme Court level of the state of Massachusetts, saying that the church is not allowed to receive these grants.
Well, it's interesting. If there's some sort of historic building, even if it looks old and awful, and they claim it's historic, and you're going to want to tear it down to build something, they would say absolutely not, and it's
Right.
got to be restored, and you've got to look after it. Oh, it's a church? Oh, it's an old church? Oh, well, rip it down. Get rid of anything to do with Christianity. That's where our culture is right now. It's sort of almost like when we applied for the tourism tax incentive that's offered to any tourist facility in Kentucky. And the then governor, even though we approved for it, said you can't have it because you're a Christian. We took him to court and we won.
Yeah.
Because he said you can't treat Christians as second-class citizens. Well, churches, people who go to church, we're all part of the culture. We all pay taxes, and there's freedom of religion. And just because it's a church doesn't mean they shouldn't get the funds to do this.
They say the problem with giving the church this money to do this is that it would substantially aid the church in its essential function and given the explicit religious imagery of the stained glass. So, but again, that's prejudicing against the church for what it, believes and holds to, and that's not right. We're not allowed to
It's
do
a
that.
facial
But it's just
program, they're not
the
allowed to do
pendulum has swung in this nation.
Yeah.
Churches once had a favoured position. Now, because of the secularization of the culture, it's that worldview clash.
Yeah.
Hey, George, I want to see how good you are. You say you're a scientist. Okay, here's a question. Has Dr. Purdom ever done research on the genetics of retinitis pigmentosa?
No, I know what it is, but I've never personally done any research on that area.
Well, you need to do that.
Well, that's a pretty
It's
specific.
it's a missing part of your knowledge. You don't even know.
At least you
Okay,
knew
well,
what
I
it
don't.
was.
Yeah, sorry, I can't study every genetic disorder that's out there. Sorry about that.
Maybe we could do this last one
Okay,
here.
let's go
Look
ahead
at this
and do
last one quickly. Okay, this one comes from LifeSite. Did Toys R Us hasten its own demise by donating to Planned Parenthood? So most people are probably familiar that Toys R Us went bankrupt. They're closing their 700 some odd U.S. stores. And this article is arguing that part of the reason is because of they support Planned Parenthood.
Well,
Toys
the
R Us
birth
says
rates.
the falling birth rates are one of the reasons they've had to close. There just aren't enough children. Well, if you're supporting an organization that kills children, well, you sell children's toys. Hello, it's
Yeah.
going to impact your
That's gonna be
business.
a
Well,
problem.
remember we said earlier, since Roe versus Wade, 60 million children have been killed in their mothers' wombs in
Yeah.
America. But then in this article, they go on to say, but if you account also for the children they would have had,
And their
that
grandchildren.
we would have 117 million more children, and maybe Toys R Us would still be in
Yeah,
business.
In business, yeah. It's just sad. It's sad to think that even the declining birth rate is a huge problem in the U.S. because we're not going to be able to replace ourselves.
Yeah.
We're going to make ourselves extinct.
Throughout
to
the
do
West,
that.
it's a big
so,
problem in a
yeah,
bunch of different
but-
countries.
Okay.
Yeah, my
All right.
parents did their part. They had 15 children, so they definitely did their part contributing to the.
15 children?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you got that many brothers and sisters.
I do. And tomorrow is my little sister Willow's birthday, so happy birthday, Willow.
Oh,
She turns 11.
okay. I don't
So-
have birthdays anymore. Not at my
Well, when you're
age.
11, you still have birthdays, definitely.
So we'll be back Monday.
We'll be back on Monday
Monday.
at 2 o'clock, so we'll see you then.
Hey, thanks to our studio audience.
Yep.